please.
Upgrade your trade route.
Upgrade your trade route. No, it's more like, upgrade your trade route.
Yeah, that's right.
Upgrade your trade route.
Believe it, little boy.
Something like brilliant. Believe it, little boy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Interjection here. And from the title, you may have guessed something is happening indeed. Saturday Smackdown, but instead on a Sunday. So, for those of you that don't know, this is an event that me and Zuta used to do once a week, where we'd get some top-level players together and battle it out in the new world. We'd do a best of 7 each week, and it was a lot of fun. Trouble is, though, Zuta and I, we got a bit older, and after we did it for a couple of years, it sort of started to get a bit boring, so we stopped doing it, and that was the end of that. I've sticked around. I've done commentary since for ESOC, of course, but nothing regular like in the old days. But that is all changing, as you may have guessed. Saturday or Sunday Smackdown now will be returning. But to avoid the problems of last time that I just mentioned, we're going to have our own patch. It's going to be called Smackdown Patch. And what on earth are we going to do on that ESOC patch doesn't already do, Interjection? Well, that's what this video is about. Actually, there's going to be 7 videos discussing a different topic, and they will be coming out over the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. But yes, to avoid the problem of last time, we're going to use Smackdown Patch, and what I'd like from that is a couple of things. So, firstly, and foremostly, let's start with new formats. So, in the game, we have Treaty, we have Supremacy, we have Deathmatch, we even have Starvation. That was a format that was in ESOC. We did a tournament back in the day where basically there's no food on the map. You can't gather hunt, so that's for sure. And we just thought, what would happen? What would happen to the game if you did that? Let's just have a tournament. Let's see what happens. What do the players do? How do they play the game? And it was actually really interesting, some of the decks and strategies and ideas popping up. And it really went back to the roots of what Age of Empires 3 or just strategy games in general are. We just started thinking about the game again, what would be optimal. And I think often, a lot of times, and this is why I love, say, card games, is because it's that discovery process. That's, figuring it out, optimizing and iterating. I love that about strategy games, and I think that's what draws me to them. And I think for Smackdown Patch, what we'd like to do is have new formats from time to time, like that Starvation, where, for example, we just say, let's start a game in the Colonial Age. Best of 7, but every game starts in the Colonial Age. Aside from that, normal Supremacy. What would happen? What decks would you see? What strategies would you see? I just think it's interesting, and I think it's cool. So, don't worry, because ordinary Supremacy, as it always has been in Smackdown, will remain a staple. But I think every now and again it would be fun to try a new format if we think it's interesting. And that is something we'll be doing, and that is something Smackdown Patch will enable, because obviously we don't want to be updating ESOC Patch all the time to enable that. It would be annoying with all the updates, so there is that. But also, I'd like to sneak in a few permanent changes to that as well. Now, let's be clear, I don't want to rebalance the game. I like it how it is, but what I would like to do is express some of the options available in the game that are there, but just aren't good enough, or just don't quite make it, or that no one's really bothered to explore because it just doesn't offer enough value. And mostly these are politicians, right? You often see that you'll start with, say, 4 politicians available, but only one of them you'd ever consider ever, because it's the only good one, aka looking at you, the quartermaster. But those kind of changes to cards as well, and possibly a few other small things, but really not to open more options, not to rebalance existing ones. But yes, I used to do Smackdown with a man named Zuta, but I suppose I ought to introduce, who's just been listening to me gobble on for the last 4.5 minutes, Mr. Myto, who you all have definitely seen me do commentary with before over the ESOC, and I'm sure you've seen in Smackdown as well. Very strong, capable player, but also, surprise, surprise, a very good caster as well. So, Myto, I hope I'm not making you blush too much.
Oh, my face is beet red, Interjection. No, yeah, I'm looking forward to casting some of these games, looking forward to how players adapt to some of the changes, and I think the changes will be pretty cool, too.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to do is, over the next couple of days, we'll take a few changes and we'll explain them in a video like this. So, now that we've got that big ol' introduction out the way, I think all subsequent videos will be a bit shorter than this one. We're going to aim to keep them about 10 minutes long, but this one might run over. But yeah, let's talk about the colonial age politicians. That's the title of this video. That's what we're going to talk about. And I think those are the most important things in Age of Empires 3. Namely because you start in the Discovery Age in every single game, and almost every single game will, well, let's just say every competitive game will always reach the Colonial Age. So it's important to actually have 4 decent options, I think. So if not anything else, these are the most important to me, and I think I would like to see come to Smackdown, and perhaps eventually ESOC patch, maybe, if we can prove they're not ridiculous. But enough of this, let's get into it. So I think we've covered the point of Smackdown patch, which is to enable new formats and enable a bit more diversity in the game, just open things up a bit more. And I think we've covered the philosophy of those changes as well.
Yeah, so that just kind of leads into how a lot of these changes are aimed to make decisions in the game a little bit less linear. If you look at Age of Empires 3 as a game in general, it's sort of a game of decision making. You have to make decisions that will impact your gameplay for the next 1 or 2 minutes. Like when you click on a shipment, are you going to send an economic shipment? Are you going to send like a crate shipment, which is sort of a hybrid of an economic shipment and another type of shipment, such as a military shipment, which gives you a more immediate bonus. Or like when you're aging with politicians, sometimes you want to age more quickly. You want to age with something that gives you a lot of resources, like the 400 wood politician, the quartermaster. And I think basically what these changes are going to do is make these decisions a little bit less obvious, and you'll have a little bit more room to experiment with how you'd like to, you know, add to your build order, like emphasize like a certain type of game plan and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually add some strategy back into the game. A lot of decisions are just made for you just because of the sheer value proposition. So you get sort of shoehorned into a particular build or style or strategy or whatever it is. And we're hoping to give you a bit more wiggle room to try something that suits you a bit better or is something a bit different, or just enable and express the options that are in the game, but I've never been explored. So let's start with, I think a good way to introduce this is the Quartermaster, which is the 400 wood politician, and the Philosopher Prince, which is the 500 food politician. These are essentially the same politician. Okay, yeah, one gives you wood, one gives you food, and we all know the Quartermaster is better. But even if you made the Philosopher Prince, like, you know, the food supplies is of equal value, there's still nothing there. It's just the same politician because, you know, whatever resource you age with, you're going to collect the other resource in transition. You could just gather food if you're going up with wood and vice versa. So we wanted to make the Philosopher Prince do something a bit different.
What we decided to go for was, instead of making the Philosopher Prince something like 600 food or even 700 food, you know, to even up those villager seconds or whatever to bring it in line with the Quartermaster, instead it's going to cost you 700 food instead of the usual 800 food and give you 400 food when you age up. So you'll get, you know, the same amount of villager seconds as you do from the current Philosopher Prince, 500 food, and it's less than the Quartermaster, but it opens up some different strategic options because you're going to be aging a little bit more quickly. When you're aging a little bit more quickly, maybe if you're expecting to get rushed or something like that, you can get up a little bit earlier, get some shipments out before, you know, he has units in your base. Or even if you wanted to be aggressive, you could get up maybe like 15 to 20 seconds faster and then have units pressuring his resources a little bit earlier into the game.
It's basically the same politician, but it's 100 food cheaper. So you're going to be aging up maybe a villager sooner or something like that. And it just introduces some new ideas. It's sort of like an age up fast option in a way, but it's not an age up fast option. It's just a slightly cheaper Philosopher Prince.
So then if we move on to, you know, the other politicians you have, if you think about the normal European colonial age up politicians, you've got the bishop and the naturalist. The naturalist, of course, giving you 4 cows, and the bishop giving you 2 villagers. And to be honest, you would never ever basically consider aging with either of these politicians. They don't give you anything compared to 400 wood or 500 food. It takes a very, very, very long time for them to pay off, and honestly, it's just not worth it. So we kind of figured, how could you make that better? Well, what if you kind of what if you kind of combine them into the same politician? They kind of perform the same function, you know? They're
just
both
shove
sort of
them
longer.
Together. Take the
Exactly.
bishop, take the naturalist, shove them together, one super politician, 4 cows and 2 settlers in the same age up. Would you consider that? Myto, what do you think?
You might in certain situations. You know, like they're alone. They're both sort of longer term politicians that just they don't really fulfill their role good enough to ever really consider. But if you put the two together, then you get something that pays off a little bit more quickly. It's still significantly slower than something like the Quartermaster or the Philosopher Prince. But maybe if you're playing against, I don't know, something like maybe Kinesi Super Wall style with like Water Boom and stuff like that, and you sort of want to slow down your game plan a little bit, and, you know, set yourself up for the mid to late game a little bit more, then maybe you'd consider aging with something like this.
It's the politician that keeps on giving, where Quartermaster and Philosopher Prince are set value propositions, but this, if it, you know, eventually it will pay off and become even better, and it will continue to keep being better. But it just depends if the game would allow for that. And this is putting the strategy back into which choice you'd age up with. Do you think you can get away with that? Can I do something interesting with this? Will I get away with it? That kind of thing. And I think that's interesting. So we've merged them together, and even then buffed it slightly. It's giving 3 settlers and 4 cows.
Should be some room for some interesting adaptations and stuff like that. You know, depending on the type of game, the type of map, and stuff like that. And hopefully we get to see some exciting play as a result. But now that we've combined both the bishop and the naturalist, that means that we have another politician that doesn't actually do anything, right?
Yeah, if you combine them into the two, bishop is now an empty slot, so to speak. And I think this is a good opportunity to do something brand new, something different that also adds to the game in the ways that we've been describing. And if the Quartermaster is the set value proposition, if the Philosopher Prince is that slightly earlier age up that can be interesting, if the bishop naturalist, the super bishop, whatever, yeah, basically that's now the naturalist, this is the one that keeps on giving, what can this empty slot do? And I think what we landed on was quite a cool change, something I thought was really, really interesting, and that is da-da-da-da, here it is on the screen. That was such a terrible sound effect. But it now gives you a shipment. Just straight up, you get to the next stage, and it doesn't affect your XP curve. It just changes that number from however many shipments you have, +1. And that, as you're probably thinking, is quite the value proposition, because, you know, a shipment, 700 wood, that could potentially be. That's very, very strong.
Yeah, but when you think about it, you often already have a shipment ready when you hit the Colonial Age. So sure, you're going to be getting maybe an extra 200 or 300 resources compared to the Quartermaster, but you're going to have to wait a couple of minutes before you can actually get that value, especially if you're a civilization that already has to construct a trading post. You could already be sending 2 or 3 shipments back to back, and it could be a little while before you actually get the value off of this one. So it gives you a little bit more villager seconds than the Quartermaster or the Philosopher Prince, but it's also not like super long term compared to the Naturalist.
Yeah, this is still a set value proposition in a way, but it's slower. You know, it takes 40 seconds to send a shipment rather than getting that 400 wood bonus the second you age up. You have to wait 40 seconds, and as Myto said, you'll often have a shipment ready anyway, so you'll have to send that one first before you can even send the one you've gotten for free. So that's almost like waiting 80 seconds. But it is clearly worth more. It is more villager seconds. Again, it just depends on what sort of build you're going for, what you expect your opponent to do. We're putting strategy back into the choices that are available. So that's all the options that there are in the Colonial Age. And really, the conclusion to take away from this video is obviously the introduction. Smackdown's coming back. We're going to have a Smackdown patch for new formats. But also we want to add and explore diversity, or more to the point, enable the diversity that is already in the game. And really the point is, now when you click on the Colonial Age and decide what you're going to age up with, you now have an actual choice, an actual selection, rather than just half the politicians being complete trash tier and dead content that you'd never consider. So that's the aim. We really want just like, one interesting or diverse set of options for the Colonial Age. That's the important thing to me. And I'm really pleased with these choices, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people have to say about them.
Yeah, and it's definitely possible that some of them might end up being a little bit too strong or something like that, or, too strong in certain situations. But it's all in good fun, right? We can always adjust this later and stuff like that. It's not like these changes are set in stone or they're going to be around forever sort of thing, so...
Yeah, this is not ESOC patch. We can address things very quickly. If we're going to be having a new format every other week, we can sneak in changes every other week as well, and just, constantly be changing and tweaking numbers and any issues that come up from that. But so that is going to be the end of this video. Leave a like if you're excited for Smackdown or enjoyed the video for whatever reason, or dislike it, absolutely. We'll see you all again for the next video, which will be on the Fortress Age politician changes.